My name is Marcus Holloway, and I'm a logistics coordinator for a medical supply company. The job requires me to make long-distance drives several times a month, usually transporting equipment between facilities across the Midwest. I've driven through every kind of weather, at every hour of the day and night. I thought I'd seen it all. I thought I understood the risks. But January 14th, 2023 taught me that some dangers on the highway don't announce themselves with flashing lights or road signs. They wait in the shadows of rest stops, patient and calculating. It was a Tuesday night, or technically Wednesday morning by the time everything started. I'd left Des Moines around 9 in the evening, heading east toward Davenport with a cargo of medical imaging equipment. The drive typically took about 3.5 hours, but I was making good time. The roads were clear, the temperature had dropped to around 15 degrees, and traffic was nearly non-existent, just the way I preferred it for these late-night hauls. I remember the radio was playing some talk show about unsolved mysteries. The host was discussing a series of disappearances along various interstate highways, bodies found months or years later in remote locations. I found it morbidly interesting, but didn't think much of it. Those things happened to other people, in other places. I was a careful driver, always aware of my surroundings, always checking my mirrors. I'd never had so much as a close call in all my years on the road. Around 11:30, I felt that familiar pressure in my bladder. I'd had 2 large coffees before leaving, and they were making their presence known. I spotted a rest area sign indicating services in 2 miles. Perfect timing. The coffee had kept me alert, but now it was demanding to be processed. I signaled and took the exit, my headlights cutting through the darkness as I pulled into the rest stop parking lot. The place looked exactly like 1,000 other rest stops I'd visited over the years. A small brick building housing restrooms and vending machines, surrounded by parking spaces marked for cars and a separate area for trucks. Dim streetlights created pools of yellow light across the cracked pavement, a few scattered trees at the edges, their bare branches clawing at the night sky. Everything looked normal, routine, forgettable. Except it was completely empty, not a single other vehicle in sight. I parked under one of the lights, a habit I'd developed years ago. Always park where you can be seen, my father had told me when I first started driving. It's safer that way. I locked my truck and headed toward the building, my breath creating small clouds in the frigid air. The cold bit at my exposed face and hands, making me walk faster toward the promise of shelter, however minimal. The door to the men's restroom creaked as I pushed it open. Inside, the harsh fluorescent lighting made everything look stark and clinical. White tile walls, gray stall dividers, the smell of industrial cleaner mixed with something vaguely unpleasant that all public restrooms seemed to share. The heater was rattling away in one corner, providing just enough warmth to keep the pipes from freezing. I could hear it more than feel it. I took care of business quickly, washed my hands with the thin pink soap from the dispenser, and dried them under a hand dryer that sounded like a jet engine but provided minimal heat. As I stepped back outside, I immediately noticed something that made me pause. There was a white cargo van parked at the far end of the lot, near the tree line. I was certain it hadn't been there when I'd entered the building. Absolutely certain. I would have seen it. The lot had been empty just 5 minutes ago, and I hadn't heard any vehicle approaching. In the dead silence of this isolated place, I would have heard an engine, heard tires on pavement. But there it sat, as if it had materialized from nothing. The van was old, maybe from the late 90s or early 2000s, with rust spots visible even from this distance. No company logos, no identifying marks, just a plain white van that somehow looked wrong in a way I couldn't immediately articulate. The back windows were darkened or covered, and I couldn't see anyone inside the cab, but I felt certain someone was in there, watching. I walked back to my truck, trying not to show any concern, fishing my keys from my pocket with hands that were shaking slightly from the cold, or maybe from something else. As I reached for the door handle, I risked a glance back at the van. Still no movement, no signs of life, but the feeling of being observed intensified, prickling the back of my neck like static electricity before a storm.
I climbed into my truck, locked the doors immediately, and started the engine. The dashboard lights illuminated, and I sat there for a moment, letting the engine warm up, watching the van in my rearview mirror. Still nothing. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe it was just another tired driver taking a quick break, like me. Maybe they were sleeping in the back, catching a few hours of rest before continuing their journey.
I put the truck in gear and headed toward the exit. As I passed the van, I slowed slightly and looked over. The windows were too dark to see inside, but I could swear I saw a slight movement, a shadow shifting behind the darkened glass. I pressed the accelerator and got back onto the highway, eager to put distance between myself and that inexplicably unsettling vehicle. The radio was still discussing mysterious highway disappearances. I turned it off. The silence felt heavier somehow, more present. I checked my mirrors compulsively every few seconds, but the highway behind me remained dark and empty. No headlights, no other vehicles, just the red glow of my own taillights reflecting off the guardrails as I drove. 20 minutes passed, then 30. I was starting to relax, starting to convince myself that I'd overreacted to nothing. Late-night fatigue playing tricks on an already anxious mind. Then, just as I was reaching for the radio to turn it back on, I saw headlights appear in my rearview mirror. At first, I didn't think anything of it. It's a highway. Other people drive on highways. But something about these headlights felt wrong. They were high up, like a truck or van, and they seemed to be approaching fast, much faster than the speed limit. I was already doing 75 in a 65 zone, and these lights were gaining on me rapidly. Within a minute, the vehicle was right behind me, dangerously close. I could see it clearly now in my mirrors. The white van from the rest stop, same rust spots, same darkened back windows. It had followed me. Somehow, it had followed me without me seeing it enter the highway. My heart rate kicked up several notches. I pressed the accelerator, bringing my speed up to 80. The van matched my pace exactly, maintaining that uncomfortably close distance. Too close to be accidental, too close to be anything but intentional. I changed lanes. The van changed lanes. I changed back. The van followed. This was when the first real tendril of fear wrapped itself around my chest. This wasn't road rage, wasn't someone being aggressive after a long night of driving. This was deliberate. This was purposeful. Someone in that van wanted to stay behind me, wanted to keep me in their sights. I grabbed my phone from the cup holder, intending to call 911, but there was no signal, no bars at all. We were in one of those dead zones that still pepper rural highways, places where cell coverage simply doesn't exist. I was on my own. The van suddenly accelerated and pulled alongside me. I could finally see into the cab, backlit by my headlights. There was one person visible, a driver. Male, I thought, though the details were hard to make out. He was looking straight ahead, not at me, hands steady on the wheel. His face was expressionless, blank in a way that was somehow more disturbing than any angry glare would have been. Then the van swerved toward me. I jerked the wheel right, my truck tires briefly hitting the rumble strip on the shoulder with a violent buzzing sound that rattled my teeth. The van pulled back into its lane, matching my speed again. Then it happened again, a swerve toward me, forcing me toward the shoulder, then back. It was playing with me, testing my reactions, seeing what I would do. My mind raced through options. I couldn't outrun it. My truck was good, but not built for speed. I couldn't pull over. That's probably exactly what they wanted. I couldn't call for help. The nearest town was at least 15 miles ahead. I was trapped in a metal box doing 80 miles an hour with a predator circling me. The van fell back slightly, and for a moment I dared to hope it was giving up. Then it accelerated hard and rammed into my rear bumper. The impact wasn't hard enough to send me spinning, but it was shocking enough to make me gasp. My truck lurched forward from the collision, and I gripped the steering wheel with white-knuckled hands. They'd actually hit me. This was real. This was happening. Another impact, harder this time.
My head snapped back against the headrest. I pressed the accelerator to the floor, my truck's engine roaring in protest as I pushed it to 90 miles per hour. The speedometer needle climbed past 95. 100.
The van kept pace. It was faster than it looked, much faster, and now it was pulling alongside me again, closer this time. I could see there were 2 people in the cab now. A passenger had appeared, though I couldn't see where they'd come from. Had they been in the back? The passenger was leaning forward, gesturing at the driver, pointing at my truck. They were coordinating, planning something. And that's when I noticed what the passenger was holding. It looked like a length of metal pipe, or maybe a tire iron, something heavy and blunt that could smash through a window, that could be used as a weapon. The passenger was positioning it, getting ready to swing it at my driver's side window once they got close enough. I had seconds to make a decision. Everything slowed down in that moment. My mind raced through every possible outcome, every choice I could make, knowing that the wrong one would be my last. The van was closing in, the weapon was raised, and I was running out of highway. What I did next probably saved my life. That's when I saw the sign, rest area 1 mile, another rest stop, and suddenly I had an idea. It was risky, possibly stupid, but I was running out of options and running out of road. I couldn't keep this speed up forever. Eventually I'd hit a curve I couldn't handle, or the truck would give out, or I'd simply make a fatal mistake. I kept my speed high, giving no indication of my intentions. The van stayed alongside me, the passenger now holding that weapon openly, no longer trying to hide it. I counted down the distance in my head, 1/2 mile, 1/4 mile. At the last possible second, I slammed on the brakes and cranked the wheel right, taking the exit at a speed that made my tires scream in protest. The truck tilted sickeningly to one side, 2 wheels briefly leaving the pavement before gravity pulled me back down. The van shot past the exit, its brake lights flaring red as it tried to stop, but it was going too fast. I watched in my mirror as it skidded, fishtailed, and finally disappeared from view as I took the curve of the off-ramp. I didn't slow down. The rest stop building appeared ahead, lit up like a beacon in the darkness, and miracle of miracles, there were vehicles there. I could see a semi-truck, a couple of cars, people moving around near the building, safety in numbers, witnesses. I pulled into the lot so fast I nearly hit the curb, screeched to a stop near the entrance, and jumped out of my truck with my phone in hand. Still no signal. I ran toward the building where a trucker was walking out with a coffee in hand. He took one look at my face and immediately put down his drink. "What's wrong?" he asked, his voice gravelly but concerned. "Someone's been following me," I managed to get out, my voice shaking. "White van. They rammed me. They're trying to—" I didn't finish the sentence because at that moment the white van came screaming into the parking lot. It didn't slow down. It came directly at us, engine roaring, headlights blazing. The trucker grabbed my arm and yanked me toward the building's entrance, just as the van skidded to a stop where we'd been standing seconds before. Other people were shouting now. Someone was yelling about calling the cops. The van's door opened. The driver stepped out. He was tall, wearing a dark jacket and jeans, face still oddly expressionless. He looked around at all of us, at the phones people were pulling out, at the trucker who'd positioned himself protectively in front of me. Then, without a word, he got back in the van and drove away. Just like that, he left. The whole thing had lasted maybe 15 seconds, but it felt like an eternity. The trucker called the police on his CB radio while I stood there, shaking not from cold but from the adrenaline crash that was hitting me like a physical force. The police arrived 20 minutes later. I gave my statement, described the van, described the driver as best I could. They found minor damage to my rear bumper, consistent with being struck by another vehicle. They took photos, filed a report, told me they'd patrol the area, and put out a description of the van. But here's the thing that still keeps me up at night.
When the police checked the security cameras from that first rest stop, the one where this all started, they found something impossible. The van was there on the footage. I could see myself walking to the restroom, see myself walking back to my truck, and in that time, yes, the van did appear in the lot. But I never drove past it on my way out. The footage showed the van staying in that far corner of the lot the entire time. It never moved. It never left. And yet, somehow, it had gotten onto the highway behind me and followed me for miles. The police had no explanation for it. The footage didn't lie, but my experience didn't lie either. Both things were true, and both things were impossible. They never found the van, never identified the driver or the passenger. The case is still technically open, but I know it's going cold. These things happen, the detective told me. People slip through the cracks. Sometimes we just never get answers. I still do the overnight drives for work. Can't really avoid it. It's part of the job. But I don't stop at rest areas anymore. I plan my routes carefully, making sure I'm near towns when I need to take breaks. I drive during the day whenever possible, and I keep my phone charged, keep checking for signal, keep watching my mirrors. Because sometimes, late at night when I'm on an empty stretch of highway, I see a white van in the distance. It's never close enough to be sure it's the same one. It never approaches, never follows, but it's there, just there, reminding me that on one January night, I was chosen as prey by something I still don't understand. The police theorize it might have been an attempted carjacking or robbery, but carjackers don't follow you for miles. They don't coordinate from multiple vehicles. They leave when confronted by witnesses. Whatever was happening that night, whatever those men wanted, I'm thankful I never found out. I'm thankful the trucker was there. I'm thankful for the other people in that parking lot. Because I think if I'd been alone, if that second rest stop had been empty like the first one, I wouldn't be here telling this story. I'd be a statistic, another unsolved disappearance on some stretch of Interstate 80, another voice in the darkness that nobody hears. If these stories are making you check your locks tonight, consider subscribing for more true horror stories every week. There's so much more darkness out there on those lonely highways than most people realize.
I realized he'd been following me for over 3 hours when I saw him at the gas pump directly across from mine. Same blue Chevy truck, same expressionless face behind dark sunglasses, same deliberate movements that were just a little too careful, a little too measured. He wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. That's when I knew I was in serious trouble. My name is Veronica Ashford, and what I'm about to tell you happened in the fall of 2022 on Interstate 70. I'm a pharmaceutical sales representative, which means I spend a lot of time on highways, driving between cities, making calls, attending conferences. I thought I knew how to stay safe on the road. I thought I understood the dangers. I was wrong. It was October, early evening, and I was driving from Kansas City to Denver for a conference. The drive usually takes about 10 hours, but I'd broken it up with an overnight stay planned in a motel outside Hays, Kansas. I'd made this drive dozens of times before. I knew the route, knew the good rest stops, knew which stretches had cell service and which were dead zones. I was prepared, or so I thought. The sun was setting as I passed through Salina, painting the Kansas prairie in shades of orange and pink. Beautiful in that stark, lonely way that the Great Plains can be. Traffic was moderate, mostly other commercial travelers like myself, people heading to various destinations across the heartland. I had my music playing, had my coffee in the cup holder, had my phone navigation showing the route. Everything was normal. Around 7 in the evening, I noticed a pickup truck behind me. It was a dark blue Chevy, older model, maybe late 2000s. Nothing remarkable about it, nothing that stood out. It was just another vehicle on the highway, maintaining a steady pace a few car lengths behind me. I noticed it only because I make a habit of checking my mirrors regularly, defensive driving and all that. 30 minutes passed. The truck was still there, same distance, same lane position. I changed lanes to let a slower car merge. The truck changed lanes too. I passed a semi. The truck passed the semi. We were approaching the turnoff from my motel, and the truck was still maintaining that exact position behind me. I started to feel uneasy, not afraid yet, just uncomfortable. It could be coincidence. We might just happen to be going the same direction at the same speed, but something about the precision of it bothered me, so I decided to test it. I took my exit for the motel, signaling well in advance. The truck took the same exit. My unease shifted toward actual concern. The motel was visible from the highway, clearly marked, a decent-sized chain hotel that catered to road-weary travelers. I pulled into the parking lot, and the truck followed me in. I parked near the entrance, under the lights. The truck parked 3 spaces away. I sat in my car for a moment, engine still running, watching in my rearview mirror. The truck's engine was running too. I could see a figure in the driver's seat, silhouetted against the last light of sunset, but I couldn't make out any details. They weren't getting out. They were just sitting there, waiting. This is where I made my first mistake. I should have driven away immediately, should have gone to a police station or a busy gas station, anywhere with people and lights and security. But I'd been driving for hours, I was tired, and I'd already paid for the room online. I convinced myself I was overreacting. Maybe they were waiting for someone. Maybe they were making a phone call. Maybe they had nothing to do with me at all. I grabbed my overnight bag from the passenger seat, locked my car, and walked quickly to the motel entrance. Every few steps, I glanced back. The truck hadn't moved. The driver was still sitting there, completely motionless. I reached the door, pulled it open, and stepped inside with a relief so profound it almost made my knees weak. The lobby was warm and bright, with generic hotel furniture and the smell of industrial carpet cleaner. A tired-looking young man stood behind the front desk, barely looking up from his phone as I approached. I checked in, got my room key, and asked in what I hoped was a casual voice if there was security in the parking lot. "Security?" He looked confused. "No, we don't have security. This is Hays, Kansas. Nothing ever happens here." Famous last words. I went to my room, which was on the 2nd floor overlooking the parking lot. I looked out the window immediately. The blue truck was still there, still running, still occupied. I watched it for 10 minutes while I tried to convince myself this was nothing to worry about. Eventually, the truck's lights turned off, but I could see the glow of a phone screen or something inside the cab. Someone was definitely still in there. I called the front desk. "There's a truck that's been parked in your lot for a while with someone sitting in it. It's making me uncomfortable." The desk clerk sounded annoyed. "Ma'am, this is a public parking lot. People park here sometimes, even if they're not guests. I can't do anything about that." "Can you at least call the police to check it out?" "The police? For someone sitting in a truck? They'd laugh at me."
He was probably right. What would I even tell them? Someone drove behind me on a public highway and then parked in a public parking lot? I hadn't been threatened, hadn't been approached, hadn't been harmed in any way. I sounded paranoid even to myself. I decided to try to sleep, convincing myself that in the morning the truck would be gone and I'd feel silly about the whole thing. I kept my phone next to the bed, kept the deadbolt locked and the chain on. I even pushed the room's chair against the door for extra security. Then I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to every sound. At some point, exhaustion won out over anxiety, and I fell asleep. When I woke up, it was just after 5 in the morning. The room was still dark, the curtains blocking out most of the light from the parking lot. I grabbed my phone and immediately went to the window, pulling the curtain aside just enough to peek out. The blue truck was gone. Relief washed over me. It had been nothing, just coincidence and paranoia. I felt foolish for letting it get to me so much. I showered, got dressed, checked out of the motel by 6:30, and got back on the road as the sun was starting to rise. The morning was crisp and clear. Traffic was light, and I was in good spirits despite my interrupted sleep. I'd been driving for about 45 minutes when I saw it. In my rearview mirror, several cars back, was a blue pickup truck. It might not be the same one, I told myself. Blue Chevy pickups are common. This is a major interstate. Lots of people use it. Just a coincidence. But as the miles ticked by, the truck stayed there. Same distance, same position. When cars merged in front of it, forcing it to slow down, it would patiently wait for an opening and then accelerate back to that exact spot. Not closer, not farther, just there. These stories get even darker. If you're enjoying this, hit the like button, comment, and subscribe for more real encounters from the darkest stretches of America's highways. I tried everything to shake it. I sped up to 85 miles per hour. It matched my speed. I slowed down to 60. It slowed down. I took an exit for a gas station just outside Oakley. It followed me off the highway. I didn't stop at the gas station. I got right back on the interstate. So did the truck. Now I was scared. Really scared. This wasn't coincidence. This was intentional. Someone had been following me since Kansas City, had waited outside my motel all night, and was now tracking me across state lines. But why? What did they want?
I tried calling 911, but my phone had no signal. Of course it didn't. This stretch of eastern Colorado was notorious for dead zones. I was completely cut off, traveling 70 miles an hour on an empty highway with someone stalking me and no way to call for help. The truck started to close the distance, slowly, incrementally, but definitely getting closer. I could see it more clearly now. The driver was wearing sunglasses, despite the morning light being relatively weak. Male, I thought, though I couldn't be certain. His face was expressionless, focused entirely on the road ahead, on me. My fuel light came on. I'd meant to stop for gas at that last exit, but panic had overridden practical thinking. Now I was running on fumes with at least another 60 miles until the next decent-sized town. I had no choice. I had to stop. I took the next exit, which led to a tiny town I'd never heard of, population 300 and change according to the sign. One main street, a handful of buildings, and a single gas station that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 1970s. But it was open, and that's all that mattered. I pulled up to a pump, and the blue truck pulled up to the pump directly across from me. We were now maybe 20 feet apart. I could see him clearly for the first time. He was in his 40s, average build, wearing a dark jacket and those sunglasses that hid his eyes. He got out of his truck and started pumping gas, never once looking in my direction, acting as if I didn't exist. But I knew better. This wasn't coincidence. This couldn't be coincidence. I pumped my gas with shaking hands, my eyes constantly darting between the pump display and the man across from me. He finished first, replaced the nozzle, got back in his truck, and just sat there, waiting for me to finish, waiting to see what I would do next. I finished pumping, screwed the gas cap back on, and walked quickly to the station's convenience store. There was an older woman behind the counter, reading a magazine. I must have looked as panicked as I felt, because she immediately put down the magazine and asked if I was okay. "That man out there," I said, gesturing toward the window. "The one in the blue truck. He's been following me for over 100 miles. I don't know what he wants, but I'm scared." She looked out the window, squinting against the morning light. "That's Travis Kellerman's truck," she said slowly. "Travis is, well, he's had some troubles over the years. Police know him well. You want me to call them?" "Yes, please." She picked up the phone and dialed. I stood by the window, watching the truck, watching the man who apparently had a name now, Travis Kellerman. The woman was talking to someone, explaining the situation in her slow, measured way. Then she covered the receiver and said to me, "Sheriff's asking if he's threatened you or approached you directly." "No, but..." "Then there's not much they can do.
Following someone on a public highway isn't illegal. Parking at the same gas station isn't illegal. Sheriff says he'll come by and have a word with Travis, but that's about all he can do.
It wasn't enough. It wasn't nearly enough, but I thanked her and went back to my car. The blue truck was still there, engine still running. I got in, started my engine, and pulled back onto the highway. In my mirror, I watched Travis Kellerman do the same. The pursuit continued for another 80 miles. He stayed behind me, never getting too close, never dropping back too far. Just there, always there. A constant presence in my mirrors, a reminder that I wasn't alone, that someone had decided to make me their target for reasons I couldn't begin to understand. But then something changed. The truck started accelerating, not just matching my speed anymore, but actively closing the gap between us. I pressed harder on the gas, but he kept coming. Within 30 seconds, he was directly behind me, so close I could see every detail of his face in my rearview mirror. He wasn't wearing the sunglasses anymore, and his eyes were completely black, not dark brown, not shadowed, black, like staring into empty sockets, like looking at something that wasn't entirely human anymore. I need you to understand something. I'm not someone who believes in supernatural things. I'm a pharmaceutical rep. I deal in science, in clinical trials, in evidence-based medicine. I can explain away almost anything with logic and reason. But what I saw in that mirror that morning defied every rational explanation my brain tried to construct. Those weren't human eyes staring back at me. And then he smiled, a wide, predatory smile that showed too many teeth. Then he rammed into my bumper. The impact sent my car lurching forward. I screamed, gripping the wheel as I fought to keep control. He hit me again and again, each impact harder than the last, each one threatening to send me spinning off the highway into the barren fields that stretched endlessly on either side. I saw the sign ahead, Lyman, Colorado, 5 miles. There was a town, there were people, there was help. I just had to make it 5 more miles. The truck pulled alongside me, and I made the mistake of looking over. Travis Kellerman was staring at me through his passenger window, that impossible smile still on his face, those black eyes boring into me. He lifted one hand from the steering wheel and pointed at me. Not a threatening gesture, just pointing, indicating, claiming. Then he swerved into my lane, forcing me off the road. I didn't have time to think. My car left the pavement, bounced violently over the shoulder, and went airborne for a terrifying moment before crashing down into the field. I was screaming, hands locked on the wheel, as the car plowed through dry grass and scattered rocks. Something hit the undercarriage with a sickening crunch. The car spun once, twice, and finally came to a stop facing back toward the highway. Through my cracked windshield, I could see the blue truck. It had stopped on the shoulder. Travis Kellerman was getting out, moving with deliberate slowness, taking his time because he knew I wasn't going anywhere. My car was dead, engine silent, and I was at least 100 yards from the highway in the middle of an empty field. I fumbled for my phone. Still no signal. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold it. I looked up and saw him walking toward me through the grass, in no hurry, that smile still on his face. That's when I heard the sirens. I don't know how they knew. Maybe the woman at the gas station had insisted they send someone after all. Maybe another driver had seen him force me off the road and called it in. Maybe it was just blind luck, the universe deciding I deserved one more chance. But there they were. 2 police vehicles screaming down the highway, lights flashing, sirens wailing. They saw the truck on the shoulder, saw me in the field, saw Travis Kellerman walking toward my car. He stopped, stood there for a long moment, staring at me with those impossible black eyes.
Then he turned and ran back to his truck. By the time the police reached the shoulder, he was gone, racing down the highway at speeds that no one could safely maintain. They caught him 20 minutes later when he lost control trying to take a curve at over 100 miles per hour. The truck rolled 3 times and ended up in a ditch. Travis Kellerman was pulled from the wreckage, still alive, barely, and was taken to a hospital in Denver. I gave my statement to the police from an ambulance, told them everything, including the impossible parts about his eyes, knowing how crazy it sounded. The officers listened politely, but skeptically. They'd heard lots of traumatic statements before, they said. The mind does strange things when we're terrified, creates details that might not have been there. But then they did a background check on Travis Kellerman, and what they found made even the skeptical officers go quiet.
He'd been released from the Colorado State Hospital, a psychiatric facility, just 4 days before I made that drive. He'd been committed 3 years earlier after being arrested while following a different woman across 2 states. During his evaluation, he'd claimed he could see into people's souls and that some souls were meant to be collected. The woman he'd been following 3 years ago had also described his eyes as wrong and not human. She'd survived only because she'd crashed her car near a highway patrol station, close enough that officers reached her before Kellerman could. There had been 4 other women before her. 4 other incidents of Kellerman following women across hundreds of miles, terrorizing them, forcing them off roads. 3 of those women survived. 1 didn't. Her body was found 6 months after she went missing, in a field just off Interstate 70, not far from where he'd forced me off the road. Travis Kellerman is back in custody now, this time in a maximum security facility. The doctors say he has a combination of mental illnesses that create delusions and violent fixations. They say his eyes look normal on examination, that what I saw was probably a trick of light or a symptom of my own trauma. But I know what I saw, and I know that there are things in this world that medical science and rational thinking can't fully explain. Things that wear human faces but aren't entirely human inside. I don't make that drive anymore. I fly to Denver now, even though it's more expensive and less convenient. I can't put myself back on that highway, back in that vulnerable position where something wearing the face of a man named Travis Kellerman can decide to hunt me. The highway isn't safe, not because of accidents or weather or mechanical failures. It's not safe because there are things out there, driving the same roads we drive, looking at us through windows and mirrors, deciding which of us will be their next prey. The woman standing beside the broken-down car looked desperate, sweating in the 100-degree heat, waving frantically as I approached. Every fiber of my being told me to keep driving, but I didn't. I pulled over. I stopped to help. That decision almost cost me my life. They found the syringe 3 days later, half buried in the dirt where she'd fallen from my truck. Ketamine. Enough to knock out a man twice my size. The police told me I was lucky. They told me 6 other people hadn't been as lucky. They told me the woman I'd picked up didn't exist in any database, on any missing persons report, in any system they could access. She was a ghost, a predator, and I'd invited her right into my truck. My name is DeAndre Washington, and this is what happened on Route 82 in the summer of 2023. I was driving Route 82, a 2-lane highway that cuts through Lincoln National Forest, heading toward Artesia with a truck full of equipment for a dental office. The route is beautiful in a harsh, unforgiving way. Mountains and desert, sparse vegetation clinging to life in the relentless heat. The kind of landscape that reminds you how small and insignificant humans are in the grand scheme of things. It was around 2 in the afternoon, the worst time of day for heat.
the kind of heat that creates mirages on the pavement, that makes the air shimmer and dance. I had the air conditioning on full blast, had a cooler full of water bottles, and was making decent time despite the winding mountain roads. That's when I saw the red sedan pulled over on the shoulder, hazard lights blinking, and standing next to it, a woman waving her arms trying to get my attention. In another time, on another road, I would have driven past. Company policy explicitly forbids stopping for stranded motorists. We're supposed to call it in and let proper authorities handle it. But this was Route 82 in the middle of Lincoln National Forest. The nearest town was 30 miles in either direction. No cell signal out here. And in this heat, someone stranded could die waiting for help that might not come for hours. I made a decision that I still question to this day. I pulled over.
The woman was in her late 20s or early 30s, dressed in jeans and a t-shirt, looking hot and desperate. As I got out of my truck, she hurried toward me, relief evident on her face. "Thank God," she said breathlessly. "My car just died. Engine overheated, I think. I've been stuck here for over an hour. Do you have any water? And is there any chance you could give me a ride to the nearest gas station?" I hesitated. Something about the situation felt off, but I couldn't put my finger on what. The car looked legitimately broken down, hood up, steam visible around the engine compartment. The woman seemed genuinely distressed. The heat was real, dangerously real. People died in this kind of temperature when stranded. "I have water," I said, "but I'm not supposed to give rides to anyone. Company policy. I can call for help once I get to an area with cell service." Her face fell. "That could be hours. Please, I just need to get to Artesia. I'll pay you. I'll give you whatever cash I have." I looked at the car again, at the empty highway stretching in both directions, at the relentless sun beating down on everything. I thought about my own mother, thought about someone leaving her stranded in a situation like this. "All right," I said, against every instinct that was telling me to refuse, "but just to Artesia. That's where I'm heading anyway." She smiled, a broad, genuine-looking smile that should have made me feel better, but somehow didn't. "Thank you so much. You're literally saving my life." She grabbed a small duffel bag from her car and walked back to my truck. I gave her a bottle of water from my cooler, which she drank gratefully. We got in, and I pulled back onto the highway, leaving the red sedan with its hazard lights still blinking behind us. For the first few minutes, she didn't say much, just drank the water and looked out the window. I tried to make conversation, asking the usual questions. Where was she from? Where was she heading? What had brought her out to this isolated stretch of highway? Her answers were vague, inconsistent. First, she said she lived in Alamogordo, then Roswell. Then she seemed to forget she'd said either of those and mentioned El Paso. She said she was visiting family, then said she was driving to a job interview, then couldn't remember what kind of job it was supposed to be. None of it added up, but I told myself she was probably just flustered from the heat and stress of being stranded. Then she asked me to turn off the air conditioning. "It's making me feel sick," she said. "Can we roll down the windows instead?" I looked at the temperature gauge on my dashboard. It was 103 degrees outside. "You sure? It's pretty hot out there." "I'm sure. Please." Reluctantly, I turned off the AC and rolled down the windows. The heat hit like a physical force, sucking the comfortable air out of the cab and replacing it with desert furnace blast. Within seconds, I was sweating. Within a minute, it was almost unbearable. But she seemed fine, perfectly comfortable, even though the heat was pouring through her window too. That's when I started to really worry. "So your car just overheated?" I asked, trying to keep my tone casual. "Yeah, just stopped running." "That's strange. I noticed your hood was up, but I didn't see any steam or smell any coolant. Usually when an engine overheats, there are pretty obvious signs." She didn't answer,
just looked out the window at the passing landscape. And you said you've been stuck there for over an hour, but your hazard lights are on. Most people turn those off to save battery after a while. Still no answer. The silence stretched out, thick and uncomfortable. I glanced over at her, and for the first time I really looked at her face. Her skin was too perfect, too unblemished for someone who'd supposedly been standing in the sun for an hour. No sunburn, no visible sweat, no signs of heat exhaustion. And her eyes, when she finally turned to look back at me, were completely flat, emotionless, like looking at a mannequin. "Where exactly in Artesia do you need to go?" I asked, my hands tightening on the steering wheel. "Anywhere is fine. Just drop me off in town." "What's your name? I should probably know that since you're in my truck." "Does it matter?" The hair on the back of my neck stood up. Something was very wrong here. I'd made a terrible mistake picking her up, and now I was 30 miles from anywhere, alone on an isolated highway with a stranger who was asking questions I couldn't answer, but setting off every alarm bell in my head.
I saw a dirt road ahead, one of the many Forest Service access roads that branch off Route 82. Without signaling, without warning, I took it. The truck bounced along the rough surface, and I brought it to a stop in a small clearing about 50 yards from the highway. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice still eerily calm. "My GPS is acting up. Need to recalculate the route." I fumbled with my phone, not actually doing anything with it, just buying time to think. She reached into her duffel bag. Time seemed to stop. I saw her hand disappearing into that bag in slow motion, saw her fingers wrapping around something inside. Every instinct I had was screaming at me that whatever she was reaching for, I didn't want to see it. I didn't want to know what was in there. But I was about to find out. I saw the movement in my peripheral vision and reacted on pure instinct. I grabbed her wrist before she could pull out whatever she was reaching for. We struggled for a moment, her stronger than I expected, before I yanked the bag away from her and threw it toward my door. "Get out," I said, my voice shaking. "Get out of my truck right now." She looked at me with those flat, dead eyes. "Make me." I need to be clear about something. I've never hit a woman in my life. I was raised to believe that violence against women was the absolute worst thing a man could do. But in that moment, with her staring at me with those empty eyes, with unknown dangers in that duffel bag, I didn't see a woman. I saw a threat. I didn't hit her. Instead, I leaned across her, opened the passenger door, and pushed. She tumbled out, landing in the dirt with a surprised gasp that was the first genuine emotion I had heard from her. Before she could get up, I had already put the truck in reverse, backing out of that clearing faster than was safe on that rough road. I made it back to the highway and didn't slow down until I reached Cloudcroft, the first town with any kind of police presence. I went straight to the police station and reported everything. They listened, took notes, seemed concerned but skeptical.
"Did she threaten you?" the officer asked. "Did she have a weapon?" "I don't know what she had. I didn't let her pull it out." "So she might have just had personal items in her bag?" "Maybe, but something was wrong. Everything about her was wrong." They sent a unit out to investigate. They found the red sedan, still on the side of Route 82, right where she'd said it would be. The car was registered to a woman named Elizabeth Branson, who had been reported missing 3 days earlier by her family in Albuquerque. Elizabeth Branson's photo looked nothing like the woman I'd picked up. The car had been stolen, probably abandoned on that road as bait. They searched the area but never found the woman. No footprints leading away from where I'd left her, no signs of anyone in the nearby forest. It was as if she'd simply vanished. But they did find something in the dirt near where she'd fallen from my truck. A syringe, still in its sterile packaging, and a small vial of clear liquid. The police lab tested it. Ketamine, a tranquilizer strong enough to knock out someone my size in seconds. The officer, who'd seemed skeptical at the station, called me a week later. "You were right to trust your instincts," he said. "We've been coordinating with New Mexico State Police. There have been at least 6 other incidents along Route 82 and surrounding highways over the past 2 years. People stopping to help stranded motorists, then being robbed, sometimes assaulted. We think it's part of a larger operation, probably multiple people working together. Fake breakdowns, victims who stop to help, then get drugged and robbed. Have you caught anyone? Not yet. They're smart. They move around. They don't leave much evidence. Your case is the first time someone's gotten away and reported it before anything happened. You probably saved your own life, maybe saved yourself from a lot worse than just robbery."
But here's what keeps me up at night. They never found that woman. They never identified her. They never caught anyone involved in that operation. And the last reported incident on Route 82 was just 3 months ago. A truck driver stopped to help a woman with a disabled car. He's still missing. They found his truck abandoned, his delivery scattered across the highway, his phone and wallet gone. The woman's car was there, the same setup, the same trap, but no driver, no body, nothing. I still make deliveries through New Mexico. It's my job. It's how I pay my bills. But I never take Route 82 anymore. I add an extra 100 miles to my route to avoid it. I don't care how much extra time it takes, how much extra fuel it costs. That stretch of highway has something wrong with it, something predatory lurking in the heat and the isolation. And I drive past stranded motorists now, every time, even when it's clearly a real breakdown, even when I can see they genuinely need help, even when I feel guilty about it. I drive past, because I know that one of those times, maybe the next time, it won't be real. It'll be another trap, another predator in human form, waiting for someone like me to make the mistake of believing that helping people is always the right thing to do. The highway isn't safe. The people on it aren't always what they seem. And sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is exactly what your conscience tells you is right. That's a hard lesson to learn, a bitter truth to accept, but it's kept me alive. It's kept me from becoming another missing person, another unsolved disappearance on a lonely stretch of southwestern highway. If you ever find yourself driving through remote areas, through places where help is hours away and cell service is non-existent, remember this: not everyone who needs help is really in trouble. And sometimes the trap is so perfect, so convincing, that you won't see it until it's too late. Trust your instincts. Trust that little voice that says something's wrong, even when you can't explain why. Because that voice, that instinct, might be the only thing between you and becoming another story that someone else tells years later. Another warning that goes unheeded until it's too late. If you enjoy real horror stories like this, kindly subscribe, like, and comment where you are watching from.